"We're better off without you," my son said, not with rage, but with the terrifying ease of someone closing a door that had always been open. I wasn't supposed to hear it. They were just outside the curtain, their voices hushed, respectful of the hospital hush but not of me. They assumed I was sleeping, or too far gone to register anything but the beeping of machines. But I heard it. Every word. Claire's voice first. "She needs full-time care. We can't." Then Daniel, my only child, finishing her sentence like he always does when he's trying to be firm. "We're better off without her." Not angry. Not grieving. Just tired. Like I was a piece of old furniture they didn't know where to put. I lay there with my fingers curled in on themselves, still tingling from the stroke. My right side didn't fully obey me yet, but my ears were sharp. My heart even sharper. I turned my face to the window, where morning filtered through cracked blinds and threw lines of light onto the hospital floor. I didn't cry. Not then. I went inward instead. Somewhere far deeper than grief could reach. A place where memory lived uninvited. It wasn't supposed to end like this. I raised Daniel alone, buried my husband with trembling hands and told myself I could manage. I never remarried. I gave up teaching to be home when Daniel came through the door. He used to run into my arms like I was the whole world. And now I was an inconvenience. A weight. A problem to solve quietly, without fuss. My doctor came in mid-morning. She was kind, gentle-eyed, with hands too warm for such a cold place. "Eleanor," she said, brushing the monitor cord from my shoulder. "The stroke was mild, but you need rest. We'll monitor your speech and movement. You may notice some fatigue, maybe fogginess, but nothing permanent." I nodded. Words sat heavily in my throat, but not because of the stroke. I didn't mention what I'd heard. It was mine to hold. The room emptied again. No flowers came. No calls. Just the slow drip of saline, and the occasional nurse checking vitals. Claire didn't return. Daniel didn't either. I watched the second hand of the wall clock circle endlessly, and every tick felt like a small forgetting. A heartbeat from someone else's life. By the second evening, I realized no one was coming. I tried not to feel shame, but it draped over me like the hospital blanket, thin and insufficient. At night, the room swelled with sounds. Shoes squeaking down the corridor, the muffled hum of the intercom, the shuffling of my roommate turning over, breathing like the wind in old curtains. I stared at the ceiling and tried to remember the last time Daniel said, "I love you," without checking his phone halfway through. I couldn't. The nurse who brought my dinner tray on the third night smiled too brightly, her eyes flicking over the untouched food. She said, "You've got to eat to heal." Like I was stubborn, not shattered. I forced a bite of gelatin and it stuck in my throat. When I finally spoke to the doctor again, I asked when I could go home. She looked hesitant. "We'll discharge you tomorrow, if your vitals remain stable," she said. "But I'd really suggest someone be with you the first few days." I said nothing. What was there to say? My son had already offered his verdict. That night, I rose slowly from the bed, careful of the four-line, and shuffled to the window. The lights of the city pulsed gently below, lives unfolding without me. A family walked into the emergency room. Mother, father, 2 children clinging to each hand. I imagined being the mother again. I imagined someone clinging to me. Back in bed, I folded my hands over my lap and whispered into the dark, "I wasn't always like this. I used to host the holidays. Roast chicken with rosemary from my garden. Lace tablecloths. Daniel would bring Claire, and they'd sit on the couch while I made too much food. I never minded. It felt like love. But over the years, those visits dwindled. The meals got shorter. The thanks became text messages. And when I stopped sending holiday reminders altogether, no one noticed. By morning, I felt light, hollow maybe but strangely clear. They wheeled me to the front doors around 10. The nurse asked if someone was coming to get me. I lied. Said my neighbor was parked around the corner. I didn't want to see the pity in her eyes. I ordered a cab and gave the driver a tip I couldn't afford. He didn't make small talk. Just dropped me at my house with the engine still running. The key turned harder than I remembered. Dusk greeted me before the silence did. Inside, the air was stale, undisturbed. I left the curtains drawn. I sat in the chair by the window, the one where I used to read poetry aloud to Daniel when he was small, and watch the dust catch in sunlight like falling ash. The answering machine blinked. Just one message from the pharmacy reminding me my blood pressure meds were ready. Not a word from Daniel. I boiled water and made weak tea. The kettle's whistle filled the kitchen like an old memory. The mug warmed my hands, but not much else. I drifted to the hallway where framed photos still lined the wall. Daniel at his graduation. Claire holding Maya, their daughter. My granddaughter. Her cheeks round and pink with newness. I hadn't seen her in 6 months. Claire always said, "School's busy." Like time was a tide they couldn't swim against. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the stillness. I was both too much and not enough. Too much to manage, not enough to miss. The day melted into quiet. Then a knock. Soft. Uncertain. A sound too tentative to be official. Not the postman. Not a neighbor. I didn't move at first. Let it happen again. Knock. Knock. I opened the door slowly. There she was. Brown curls tucked behind nervous ears. A wool coat too big on slim shoulders. In her hands a paper bag, slightly crumpled. "Hi," she said. I'm sorry for showing up unannounced." My mouth opened, but words didn't come. Her face itched at memory. "I don't know if you remember me," she said. "But I'm Rosa. You used to help me with reading at the community center. Years ago." Rosa. The girl with the quietest voice and the largest eyes. She used to stutter when reading aloud, gripping the book like it might fly away. I used to stay late with her, long after others had gone, just to get through a single paragraph. "I saw your name in the hospital's volunteer newsletter," she continued. I don't know why it stuck, but I remembered. I just thought I could check on you." I stepped aside and let her in. The house didn't feel as empty after that. I don't know what I expected when I came back. Maybe a ghost of warmth. Maybe something left behind. An echo, a scent, a flicker. Instead, I stepped into stillness. Not the kind that soothes. The kind that forgets. The door creaked as I pushed it open. My hand lingered on the brass knob, still cool, as if the house hadn't warmed since I left it. Dust danced in the thin shaft of afternoon light slicing through the hallway. It clung to the air like a memory that didn't want to settle. I closed the door behind me and was swallowed by silence. The kitchen was first. Always was. Muscle memory had me reaching for the kettle before I even knew why. I filled it with water that ran cold and metallic smelling. The switch clicked on with a small spark. I leaned on the counter while it hissed. My eyes drifted toward the old oak table, scarred from years of use. I could still see the faint marker stain where Daniel had drawn a pirate ship in 2nd grade. I never scrubbed it out. He was so proud of that ship, thought it could sail off the table and into the backyard. I used to sit across from him there, watching as he colored, cut paper, argued with invisible pirates. Now the table sat under a layer of dust thick enough to write on. The kettle screamed, a shrill reminder that life was still trying to push forward. I poured the water into a chipped mug. One. Just one. I carried it carefully to the living room, setting it beside me as I sank into the floral armchair. My knees cracked, and I let them. No one here to judge how old I'd become. The armchair faced the window. The curtains hung heavy. One corner slumped from where the rod had bent. Outside, the hedge was overgrown. A vine curled toward the gutter like it had ambitions. I sipped the tea, too strong, too hot, and let my eyes wander. There. On the far wall. The wedding photo. It used to be a centerpiece. Now it was barely visible beneath a soft coat of gray. I stood slowly and wiped it with my sleeve. His eyes still smiled. Mine too. We were absurdly young, dressed in joy and borrowed lace. He'd called me his Eleanor ever after. Said he married me for my laugh, and stayed for my stubbornness. I touched the frame, and my fingers came back smudged. "I'm still here," I whispered to him, to the room, to whatever might be listening. "I just don't know who I'm supposed to be anymore." I picked up the phone. Daniel's number was still in my favorites. I stared at the name. It looked strange now, like it belonged to someone else. I pressed dial. It rang. and rang. Voicemail. Hi, darling, I said, voice wobbling more than I wanted. It's Mum. I'm home now. Just wanted to hear your voice, I suppose. No pressure. I trailed off. Just call when you can. I hung up before the beep ended. I didn't say I missed him. I didn't say I'd heard what he said. What good would it do? The words were already out in the world, floating between us like smoke. Invisible but choking. I wandered through the rooms then, slow and unsure. The hallway still had the dent where Maya crashed her scooter into the wall. I'd laughed so hard I cried, and she kept apologizing, thinking she'd done something terribly wrong. I told her it was just a house, it was her that mattered. I passed the linen closet and paused. I reached in, pulled out an old flannel nightgown that still smelled faintly of lavender. I held it to my face. My breath caught. It smelled like a version of me I'd almost forgotten. In the bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the dresser. On top, a bowl of spare buttons, a broken chain, a stack of envelopes I hadn't opened before the hospital. I pulled them into my lap. Mostly bills. Advertisements. Junk. But near the bottom, one envelope, yellowed slightly. No return address. The handwriting was unfamiliar but careful. A pen had pressed with intention. I opened it. Only one sentence inside. I never forgot what you did for me. May I visit? No name. No date. Just those words. My hands trembled, and I read it again. And again. It didn't feel like a threat. No. It felt reverent. Like a whisper in a cathedral. Someone remembered me. Something I did mattered enough to echo. I set the letter down and leaned back. The ceiling fan spun slow above, stirring nothing but stale air. I thought about the community center, about all the children I'd read with over the years, about the food drives, the long Sunday mornings spent sorting cans and folding blankets. Had it come from there? A neighbor? A child who had grown up and remembered kindness? Or something more personal? Someone I'd once let into my own pain? The mystery of it both comforted and frightened me. I rose again, restless, and walked into the dining room. The china cabinet stared at me like a forgotten heirloom. Glass dull, wood faded. I opened it and pulled out a small porcelain bird. It used to sit on the sill in the kitchen. Maya loved it. Called it Graham's feather baby. I placed it back on the window ledge. It looked so small. So delicate. I returned to the living room, letter still in hand, and sat in the armchair. The clock ticked slowly. The tea had gone cold. The house was quiet again, but not as cruelly. The silence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like a pause. I looked at the letter one more time, and then placed it in the drawer of the side table, right next to an old key I no longer remembered the purpose of. I left it there, between the forgotten and the maybe. I wasn't sure what to do. I wasn't sure who I was without Daniel's calls or Maya's drawings taped to my fridge. I wasn't sure how to matter when no one needed anything from me anymore. But someone remembered. And they wanted to come. I sat still for a long while. Then I pulled a notebook from the bottom drawer. One of the many I'd bought over the years, always telling myself I'd write stories in them, or recipes, or something worth leaving behind. I opened to the first page, and simply wrote, "Today someone remembered me." The envelope stayed in the drawer overnight, humming like a small, sleeping animal. I didn't touch it again until morning, though I barely slept. I lay in the dark, imagining a dozen different faces, voices, scenarios, each more impossible than the last. When the sun broke through the curtains, soft and golden like an old photograph, I pulled the letter out again. I never forgot what you did for me. May I visit? The handwriting was neat but unsure. No signature, no return address. But something about the curve of the M in me, the slight slant of the R in forgot, something itched at memory. I closed my eyes. A girl. Quiet. Always wearing long sleeves, even in spring. She sat at the edge of the classroom like she was afraid of spilling into someone else's space. Rosa. That was her name. Rosa with the cracked glasses and bruised silence. She'd been part of the school reading program back when I still volunteered twice a week. The kind of child adults skimmed over. Too shy to sparkle, too smart to raise concern. But I saw her. Her eyes followed every word with a hunger I couldn't ignore. We had tea in the garden once, at the end of the school year. I remember slicing lemon cake and pouring milk into her chipped cup. She stared at her lap the entire time until the very end, when she whispered, "You were the first to see me." Then she left. Years passed. I hadn't heard her name, hadn't seen her face. Until now. Could it really be her? Why now? I carried the letter to the kitchen like it might dissolve in my hands. Set it next to the kettle. Watched the steam curl. My first thought was joy. The second, fear. What if she was just being kind? What if I had become someone people visited out of obligation? What if this was just another way of being managed? I nearly threw the letter out right then. But then I thought of her voice, barely above a whisper. "You were the first to see me." That wasn't pity. That was something real. With trembling fingers, I pulled out a sheet of stationery from the side drawer. Cream-colored, still smelling faintly of cedar. My hands hovered over the page for a long time. Then I wrote, "Rosa, I remember you well. The garden. The quiet courage you carried like armor. I'd be honored to see you. My door is open. Sunday afternoon if you're free. Eleanor." I slipped the note into a fresh envelope, wrote her name in soft cursive, and left it at the front step with a rock on top. I didn't know how she'd get it, but somehow I knew she would. The next 2 days passed like preparation for a coronation. I cleaned. Not just dusting. Deep cleaning. The kind that starts with wiping the mantle and ends with scrubbing grout you haven't looked at in years. I rearranged the bookshelves, polished the silver teaspoons, and ironed the tablecloth I used to bring out only at Christmas. I baked lemon cake. My hands remembered the recipe even though my mind didn't trust itself anymore. Flour dusted the counter. I licked batter from the wooden spoon like I did when Daniel was small. I laid out the best china, white with blue scalloped edges, and placed 2 porcelain birds at either end of the table. Maya used to call them the whisperers. By Sunday noon, the house smelled like sugar and citrus and nervousness. I stood in front of the hallway mirror, smoothing my skirt, brushing imaginary lint off my blouse. My reflection looked older than I remembered. The scar above my eyebrow from the fall at the hospital still pink and tender. But there was color in my cheeks. A light in my eyes I hadn't seen since. Knock. Knock. I didn't breathe. I opened the door. Rosa stood on the step, wrapped in a deep green coat. Her hair had grown out, still thick and unruly, but now pulled back with confidence. Her glasses were newer, sleeker. She was taller, too. Or maybe I'd just grown smaller. "Eleanor," she said, smiling. "You look just the same." I laughed. "That's a kind lie, Rosa." We hugged. Gently, carefully, but sincerely. She stepped inside, looking around with eyes that saw everything. "You moved the bookshelf," she said. I blinked. "How do you remember that?" "I remember everything about this house." She sat at the table, and I poured the tea. The china clinked. The cake sliced perfectly. For a moment, I felt like someone else. Someone years younger, someone still hosting, still vital. We talked. Carefully at first. She told me she worked in education policy now. Traveled often. Advocated for programs like the one we met through. Programs that were disappearing from schools. "Because of people like you," she said, cutting into her cake. "Oh, I didn't do anything extraordinary." "You showed up," she said, looking directly at me. "Every week. You sat with me when I couldn't read aloud without shaking. You let me take books home. You didn't pity me. You saw me. That was everything." I had no reply. Just a full heart and suddenly wet eyes. "I kept a journal," she continued. "After we stopped meeting. I wrote you letters in it. For years. When I graduated college. When I got my first job. Even when my father passed." I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. She didn't pull away. "You were the first person who ever made me believe I'd have a future," she said softly. I couldn't speak. The house, once so heavy with silence, now pulsed with something new, presence. Real, breathing presence. "I was worried," I admitted finally, "that you were just being kind. That you came out of guilt or obligation? She frowned. Oh no. I came because I wanted to. Because I've wanted to for a long time. I just didn't know if you'd want to see me. I never forgot you, Rosa, I said. I just didn't think I mattered anymore. Her eyes softened. You matter more than you know. We sat for a while longer, finishing tea, exchanging pieces of lives lived apart. She asked gentle questions. I told her about Daniel, in pieces, about the birthday that went uncelebrated, about the stroke. I left out the hospital hallway, the conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. Some wounds were still too fresh to share. But she understood. I could tell. When it was time to go, Rosa stood in the doorway and turned to me. Would you like to go for a walk sometime? She asked. Fresh air, a change of scenery? I hesitated. The outside world had grown larger and louder since the hospital. But the way she asked, like it wasn't a test but an invitation, I nodded. I'd like that. She hugged me again, firmer this time. As I watched her walk down the path, her coat catching the wind, I realized something simple and profound. I didn't feel erased anymore. Not entirely. The pavement felt unfamiliar beneath my shoes, like the ground was testing my balance. My cane tapped with each careful step. Not out of necessity but out of habit, caution stitched into every movement since the stroke. Rosa walked beside me, a gentle pace, saying nothing, only glancing at me now and then with a quiet kind of patience. It was the first time I'd left my street in months. The park wasn't far, but it felt like a continent away. Trees whispered above us in the soft breeze, and the scent of lilac floated through the air like memory. The path curved gently toward the benches, and I chose the one half in sun, half in shade. A perfect in-between. We sat. Children ran barefoot on the grass nearby, chasing bubbles and each other. A dog barked joyfully, straining against its leash. Life pulsed around us, unbothered by grief, by aging, by silence. I watched a young mother hoist her toddler onto her hip, the child shrieking with laughter. My hand tightened slightly around the cane. I used to lift Daniel like that, his feet dangling, his cheeks sticky with jam. He'd giggle into my neck and tell me I smelled like warm toast. I sighed, just loud enough for Rosa to hear. He was everything once, I said quietly. My son. After my husband died, I poured everything I had into him. I didn't mind. It made sense then. Purpose has a way of blinding you to the cost. She turned toward me but didn't interrupt. I used to be more. I continued. A teacher. A writer of letters. A woman who filled rooms with ideas. And slowly, without realizing, I became the background. The one who tidies things. The one who waits. I traced the lines of the bench with my fingers, feeling splinters of old paint. Getting older isn't just about the body slowing down, I said. It's about watching your name vanish from the room. Your thoughts become suggestions. Your stories become too long. You open your mouth and no one's listening. A silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable. Just full. I miss being needed, I said. I miss being seen. Rosa's voice came low and steady. I needed you. I looked at her. Her eyes held something wet and distant. My father passed last year, she said. Cancer. Quick and brutal. I stood at his funeral and couldn't speak. All those people, all those flowers, and I couldn't say a word. I placed a hand gently on hers. But I remembered you, she said. Your steadiness. How you didn't flinch when I stuttered through sentences. How you waited, patiently, until I found the words. I used that memory like armor. Tears burned quietly behind my eyes. He was a hard man, she added. Not cruel, just closed off. I think he wanted to be more than he could manage. But at the end, I think he was proud of me. I hope he was. We sat there, two women tethered by time and loss, breathing in the soft hush of a spring afternoon. A child wandered close, maybe 4, maybe 5. She had curls like vines and hands sticky with something sweet. She paused in front of us, studying me with that curious, unapologetic gaze only children have. Then, with a solemn kind of ceremony, she held out a dandelion. I blinked. She didn't say a word. Just offered it arm outstretched, as though passing me some invisible crown. I took it. My fingers closed around the stem, delicate and gold. The girl smiled, turned, and ran back to her mother. Something inside me cracked open. Not violently. Not loudly. A softness. A release. My breath hitched. I cried. Not the kind of crying that comes in storms, but the kind that arrives like mist. Quiet tears slipping down my cheeks as I looked at that small, unimportant flower in my hand. Rosa didn't speak. She just sat there, her presence enough. That little girl didn't know me. She didn't know my name, my story, my losses. And still she gave. It was enough to undo me. I wiped my face with the corner of my sleeve, embarrassed and relieved. I didn't know I needed that, I whispered. Sometimes we don't, Rosa replied. Until something cracks the shell. We sat until the sun dipped lower, shadows growing longer beneath the trees. I used to come here with my husband, I said after a while. He'd feed the ducks and tell me ridiculous facts about trees. One time he told me oak trees gossip underground. I laughed so hard I dropped my sandwich. Rosa smiled. Maybe they do. I nodded. Maybe. When it was time to go, I stood slowly, holding the dandelion like it might float away if I let go. I placed it gently in my coat pocket. Rosa offered me her arm, but I shook my head. I think I can walk today, I said. Without help. Her smile was quiet but proud. We walked back the same way we came. The world no longer felt quite as wide. The mirror didn't lie, but it didn't offer kindness either. That morning, I stared at my reflection in the hallway glass, fingers brushing through the loose, thinning waves that had grown too long, too tired. It was hair that belonged to someone waiting. For what? I wasn't even sure anymore. Something inside me, still warm from the walk with Rosa, and that unexpected dandelion, whispered enough. So I put on my best shoes. The sensible ones. Buttoned my blouse, slipped on my coat, and walked to the corner of Elm and Ridley, where the small salon still sat with its faded blue awning and the scent of hairspray perpetually leaking out onto the sidewalk. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped in. Heads turned. Mostly younger women, stylists in trendy sneakers and tattoos peeking from their sleeves. And behind the main chair, scissors in hand, was Delia. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Mrs. Ainsworth? I smiled. Just Eleanor today. She set the scissors down like she was afraid they'd slip. My goodness, I thought you'd moved or died. I offered gently, not unkindly. Her face reddened. No, you haven't been in for years. Life got quiet, I said. And then quieter. She stepped forward, brushing invisible dust from the chair. What can we do today? I took a breath, then spoke with a calm certainty I hadn't felt in years. Cut it all. Short. A silver bob, neat, crisp. No fluff, no wafts. Something with shape. Delia blinked. Are you sure? I've never been surer. She nodded, suddenly all business. I sat, draping the cape over myself like a knight preparing for battle. As she sectioned off the hair, she tried small talk. Have you been keeping well? I had a stroke, I said. But I'm still upright. Oh, she paused unsure. I'm glad you're better. I smiled at her reflection in the mirror. I think I'm becoming something again. She resumed cutting. Silver strands floated to the floor like old seasons falling away. Each snip felt like shedding a version of myself I no longer needed. The widow, the forgotten mother, the background guest in her own life. By the time she blow-dried and shaped the final layers, I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. She looked sharp. Clean lines around the jaw. Bright silver shimmering like purpose. She looked awake. Delia's voice was soft. You look beautiful, Eleanor. Thank you, I said. And I meant it. I paid in cash and left a tip that made her eyes widen. Then I stepped back into the world, wind catching the edges of my hair like a secret. I walked to the bakery on Maple, the one with the peach tiles and the smell of butter that could draw ghosts from the grave. Eleanor, cried Mr. Jenkins, peeking from behind the counter. Well, I'll be. I thought you were in Florida. Only in spirit, I said, smiling. Do you still carry lemon scones? For you? Always. I bought two. He slipped in a third, Accidentally. At the florist's, Nora blinked twice before grinning. You cut it. I did. You look like someone who doesn't take nonsense. I've had enough to last a lifetime, I said, fingering a yellow tulip. She wrapped a small bouquet without asking. Welcome back, she whispered. Even at the library, the clerk, somewhere between her 20s and a flurry of piercings, paused as I slid a poetry collection across the counter. I love your hair, she said. Thank you, dear, I replied. It's new. I walked home lighter. Seen. But the day's real surprise came just 2 blocks from my house. I saw her before she saw me. Maya. My granddaughter. She was walking with her head down, thumbs tapping a phone. Her backpack swung from one shoulder, oversized and tired. Her hair, once in neat plaits, was now pulled back in a rushed bun. She looked older, worn in places a teenager shouldn't be. I hesitated, unsure whether to call out. Then she looked up, and stopped. Her eyes narrowed. Gran. I smiled softly. Hello, sweetheart. She approached slowly, squinting. You look different. I had a haircut. She blinked. You look like a boss. I laughed. I'll take that. An awkward pause stretched between us. She looked down at her sneakers, then back up. I didn't know you were back. Or around. Dad doesn't talk about. She cut herself off. I figured as much. I mean, it's not like anyone tells me anything. I understand. Another beat of silence. Then her voice dropped low, almost a whisper. Things at home are weird. I didn't pry. She chewed her lip. Dad's always mad. Mum just disappears into her laptop. They don't fight loud, but you can feel it, you know? I nodded. Yes. I know that kind of quiet. Her face crumpled for a second, then reset. I just wanted to tell someone. You can always tell me. She looked up, searching my eyes. Could I maybe come over sometime? For tea. She nodded. No pressure. No rules. Just tea and maybe some lemon scone, I said. Her mouth tugged at the corners. Yeah, that sounds nice. I reached into the bag and pulled one out. Here, I said, handing it to her. Fresh today. Her fingers brushed mine as she took it. Thanks, Gran. She walked off slowly, turning back once to wave. And in that moment, on a quiet street lined with whispering trees, I felt like someone again. Not just seen, but wanted. The knock came on a Thursday afternoon, tentative, soft, like a question formed in knuckles. I was already waiting in the kitchen, teapot steeping, 2 cups ready. I moved slower these days, but I still knew how to host. I still remembered how to make people feel safe. I opened the door. Maya stood there in her school jacket, eyes shadowed, phone clutched like a shield. Hi, she said. What? Kumain. She stepped over the threshold like she was entering another country. The scent of lemon and black tea wrapped around us as we moved into the kitchen. I gestured toward the table. She sat stiffly, her fingers already thumbing at her phone. I poured the tea. She accepted her cup with a quiet thanks. Not looking up. I didn't force conversation. Silence was a language I knew well. And I trusted it to open the doors that words sometimes slammed shut. She took a sip too quickly and winced as the heat hit her tongue. I smiled. She noticed, finally looking up. Sorry, she said. I'm just nervös, igus. You're here. That's enough for today. She nodded. Her eyes darted around the kitchen, landing on little things. My bird figurines, the ticking wall clock, the framed recipe Maya once scrawled in crayon for chocolate soup. I hadn't moved it in 10 years. After a while, she sighed and set her phone down face down on the table. They fight all the time, she said. Not yelling really. Just cold. Like frost you can't see, but you feel it in your bones. I nodded. It's always been kind of like that, she continued. But lately it's worse. Mum disappears into her work. Dad walks around like everyone's bothering him by existing. Her voice cracked a little on the last word, and she looked down into her cup. You once said, she murmured, that no one listens to you anymore. That it feels like you're fading. I waited. I think I'm starting to understand that. Her admission sat between us like a third presence. Not heavy, just real. You're not fading, Maya, I said. You're being muffled. That's different. And it's not your fault. She nodded, wiping her cheek quickly with her sleeve. I tried to talk, she said. But it's like, I'm always the emotional one. The overreactor. If I cry, I'm too sensitive. If I go quiet, I'm sulking. That's what they do to women, I said. Call us fragile when we're angry. Call us dramatic when we're honest. She looked at me like she was seeing something for the first time. Did you ever feel like that? When you were younger? All the time, I said. Even as a mother. Especially as a wife. She leaned forward slightly. But you always seemed so composed. Like you had it together. I chuckled softly. Oh, I was a mess. I just knew how to keep it quiet. I told her then. About how I almost left her grandfather once, early in our marriage. How I packed a bag one night and stood at the front door, shaking, waiting for the courage to go. He had stopped me, not with words, but by sitting on the couch in silence, holding out a photo of our newborn son. A peace offering. A reminder. A trap, maybe. We never talked about it again. Maya's mouth parted slightly. I didn't know that. No one does, I said. Some stories stay buried because we think they'll cause damage. But sometimes, not telling them causes more. She leaned back, drawing her knees up into the chair, hugging them like she used to when she was small. I want to go away for college, she whispered. Far. Maybe the coast. Or even abroad. I waited. But Dad says I'm too fragile. That I wouldn't last a week alone. Ist her. What do you think? I think I'm scared. But I want to try. I don't want to stay small just because he sees me that way. I reached across the table and gently took her hand. Then you must become unbreakable in your own way, I said. Her eyes brimmed, but she didn't look away. Even if it means leaving? Especially if it means leaving. She exhaled slowly, a breath that felt like it had been trapped in her chest for years. I'm so tired of trying to make everyone else comfortable, she said. I want to feel like I matter for who I am, not for how quiet I can be. Then you're already braver than I was at your age. She smiled through her tears. I don't feel brave. Neither did I. Until one day I was. We sat there, finishing our tea. The afternoon light shifted across the floor in long golden stripes. The clock ticked softly. She told me small things then. About school, a boy she liked but didn't trust. A teacher who said she asked too many questions. I listened. I didn't correct. I didn't guide. I just listened. Before she left, she stood at the door, holding her backpack tight against her chest. I'm glad I came, she said. I'm glad you did too. She hesitated. Then she stepped forward and hugged me, tight, arms around my back, cheek against my shoulder. Not the side hug of a distracted teenager. A real embrace. The kind you give when you don't know how else to say thank you for seeing me. I love you, Gran. I love you too, Maya. She pulled back, swiped at her face, and left with a small wave. I stood there a long time after she'd gone. The house was quiet again. But this silence felt different. Not emptiness. Possibility. The cafe was too bright. Too clean. Everything inside gleamed with forced charm. Chalkboard menus, trendy succulents in ceramic pots. A buzzing espresso machine that tried to drown out silence with steam. I arrived early. Not because I was eager, but because I needed the time to steady my breath. Claire had suggested the place, texting a short message 2 days ago. Can we talk? Just us? Thursday at noon. Cafe Nest. It was so unlike her that I read it 3 times to make sure it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't. Now I sat at a corner table, 2 cups ordered untouched. Earl Grey for me. Something herbal for her. She liked things mild. When she walked in, I recognized her posture before her face. Shoulders squared, eyes scanning, mouth tight. That careful tension she wore like perfume. She spotted me and offered a thin smile. I returned it. We were 2 women bound by time, but not by affection. Not yet. Eleanor, she said, sitting down, smoothing her skirt. Claire. She looked down at her cup. You look well. I had a haircut, I said. Decided I wanted to look like myself again. She nodded, fiddling with her teabag string. It suits you. A long pause. How's your health? She asked. Steady, I said. Better than expected. I take my pills. I rest. I walk. I remember my name most days. Her smile cracked slightly. That's good to hear. We sat like that for a while. Two women, teacups in hand, speaking a language made up of politeness and history. Then she said it. I was scared. Her voice dropped. Her shoulders too. I didn't speak. Just watched her carefully. She continued, not meeting my eyes. When you had the stroke, Daniel panicked. We both did. And it wasn't just fear for you. It was fear of what it would mean. If you came to live with us. If Maya lost sleep. If the house changed. If we changed. I listened. I know how that sounds, she added quickly. Cold. Selfish. Human, I said quietly. She looked at me then. Really looked. I was afraid, she said, voice cracking. That we'd fail you. That we couldn't be what you needed. I took a long breath. The kind that travels all the way from your toes to your teeth. You didn't fail me because you were afraid, I said. You failed me because you assumed I was only ever going to need. She blinked. A tear slipped down her cheek, unacknowledged. I'm not just a problem waiting to happen, Claire. I continued. I'm a woman who gave and gave and gave. And when I needed just a little in return, not even much, I wasn't even asked. I was dismissed. I know, she whispered. I know. And I'm sorry. It was real. I could feel it. No performance. No attempt to win points. Just a soft collapse into truth. I didn't want to cut you out, she said. I wanted to protect what felt stable. I thought we could control things better with distance. I nodded slowly. Distance always promises order, but it also ensures loneliness. We both sipped our tea. The cups were nearly cold. I saw Maya after she visited you, Claire said. She came home lighter, brighter. She told me about the tea, about how you listened, how you didn't try to fix anything. She didn't need fixing, I said. She needed seeing. Claire looked down. I didn't realize how much she needed you. She didn't either. Not until she had space to find out. Claire's voice was barely audible. Maybe we all do. That surprised me. She looked up again, eyes red but calm. I miss you, she said. We never really had something strong between us, but I always admired how you carried yourself, even when I didn't understand you. I let the words settle. I didn't rush to answer. Letting people sit in their own vulnerability is a kindness few offer. I appreciate you saying that, I replied. Truly. She exhaled. Daniel's still trying to figure things out. I think Maya's growing up faster than he's ready for. She's stronger than she looks, I said. She gets that from you. I smiled at that. A small, surprised smile. Claire reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. We're having dinner Saturday. Just us. Daniel, Maya, me. No guests. No performance. She slid it across the table. Would you join us? I looked at it. A simple card. My name written in her handwriting. I'd like that, I said. I wasn't sure you'd say yes, she admitted. I wasn't sure either. Until now. We sat a little longer, and though we didn't solve everything, didn't untangle every knot, we built a bridge. Fragile maybe, but it held. When we stood to leave, she hugged me. Not stiff. Not forced. Just real. I'll see you Saturday, she said. I'll bring pie. She laughed. Lemon. Always. The pie cooled on the counter as the clock struck 6. It was lemon, the old recipe, flaky, barely sweet crust with just enough tartness to make you squint and smile at the same time. I hadn't baked it in years. Not since the last real holiday we'd had together. Not since Daniel was still eager to set the table, and Maya climbed into my lap between courses. I smoothed the soft blue dress over my hips and studied myself in the mirror. The color had faded slightly with time, but it still held something warm. It was the same shade I'd worn on my wedding day, back when blue meant hope, promise, future. Now it meant return. The cab ride to their house was quiet. My hands rested in my lap, one of them still faintly trembling from time and nerve damage. The pie sat beside me, wrapped in an old checked cloth. I held it like a peace offering. A memory. A bridge. Claire opened the door. "You look beautiful," she said, her voice surprised but genuine. "And you look like someone who almost forgot the pie fork," I said with a smirk, holding it up. She laughed, stepping aside to let me in. The house smelled faintly of roasted garlic and something buttery. The lights were low, the table set with simple plates and cloth napkins. Nothing elaborate, but there was effort. Daniel was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. He turned when he heard my steps and froze for just a second too long. "Hi, Mum." "Daniel." We looked at each other like we were both trying to remember a language we used to speak fluently. "You cut your hair," he said, as if just now noticing. I did. "It suits you." "Thank you." Maya bounded in a moment later, socked feet sliding on the floor. Her arms wrapped around my waist before I could brace myself. "Hi, Gran," she said, voice muffled into my shoulder. I kissed the top of her head. "I brought the pie. I told them you would." Dinner began with the kind of conversation that feels like walking on stones across a stream. Safe if you step carefully. Shaky if you linger. Claire asked about the library renovations. I asked about Maya's classes. Daniel said something about the weather, and we all nodded like it mattered. Then Maya, bless her bravery, said, "Remember that camping trip we did when I was 7? The one where Dad dropped the entire packet of marshmallows in the river." Daniel groaned. "Don't remind me." "You were so mad," Maya laughed. "I wasn't mad," he protested. "Just marshmallow deprived." I sipped my water, watching the way the laughter shifted the air. "You cried over those marshmallows," I said softly, directing it to Daniel. He grinned. "I was 8. Still," I added, "you swore off camping for a year." "And yet," Claire said, "you insisted we go again 2 summers later." "Because Maya wanted to find Bigfoot," Daniel shot back. "I had a notebook and everything," Maya said, mock offended. "You made me hike 6 miles for a blurry stick in the bushes." We all laughed then. Really laughed. Not forced or polite. The kind that settled in your ribs. I reached for a second roll, and caught Daniel looking at me. Noticing. "Mum," he said, clearing his throat. I didn't say this when you were in the hospital." Claire gently placed her hand over his. He tried again. "I'm sorry." Silence followed. Not awkward. Sacred. "For what exactly?" I asked, but my voice wasn't sharp. It was open. For not showing up. For assuming things. For letting fear make decisions that looked like rejection. I let the silence stretch before I nodded. "Thank you," I said. "That means something." We didn't say more on it. We didn't need to. Forgiveness isn't always a ceremony. Sometimes, it's just letting someone sit beside you without bringing up the cold between you. After dessert, we moved into the living room. Maya curled up in the corner chair, legs tucked beneath her. Claire brought out a photo album I hadn't seen in years. We flipped through pictures. Daniel in overalls holding a frog. Maya as a baby in the garden with dirt smeared on her chin. Claire paused at a photo of our last Christmas together, before everything had begun to crack. "Maya still uses that old scarf you knitted," she said. "The green one." "It's got holes," Maya added. "But it still smells like cinnamon." "I used to keep it in the spice drawer," I said. "I always thought wool needed company." Daniel laughed. "That explains a lot of the weird smells in my socks." The photo album closed gently, and we sat in the warm hush that only follows shared memory. As I stood to leave, Maya jumped up. "Wait," she said. "Can you come again next week? For dinner?" Claire nodded. "We'd love that." I looked at Daniel. He hesitated for half a second, then said, "Yes, absolutely." I gathered my coat, my pie dish, and the fullness of the evening into my arms. At the door, Claire leaned in and kissed my cheek. "Thank you for coming." I held her gaze. "Thank you for asking." Outside, the air was crisp. Stars blinked above the roofline, steady and indifferent. But something had shifted. Something real. Not everything was mended. But the table had been full. The room had echoed with laughter. And I had been seen. Not as a burden. Not as a shadow. As Eleanor. I cleared the dining table one quiet morning, pushing aside the usual clutter. Yesterday's newspaper, a chipped teacup, Maya's forgotten hair tie. In the center, I laid down a smooth linen cloth, the one I once used for birthdays. Not grand occasions, just moments I wanted to mark as mine. Then I brought out the box. It was small, cedar-lined, and faintly scented with thyme. Inside, blank stationery, envelopes, a fountain pen that still bled navy blue. This wasn't a sudden urge. It had been stirring inside me for weeks, ever since that dinner. Ever since the room echoed not with silence but with laughter, mine included. I didn't feel invisible anymore. But I'd been given something more than presence. Time. Time enough to decide what I wanted to leave behind. So I began. The first letter was for Maya. My dearest girl, if you're reading this, it means life is asking you hard questions. I don't have all the answers, but I have stories. I want you to know that I've never seen you as fragile. Only tender. And those are different things. Tenderness takes strength. You carry both. Be loud when it matters. Be soft when you choose. Don't let anyone call you too much. They're only afraid you'll ask them to rise. You have my laugh, you know. The one that fills a room. Don't ever silence it. Love always. Gran. I folded the page and slipped in a photo. Maya at age 5, flower on her nose, standing on a stool as she stirred cookie dough. Her grin said, I belong here. The second letter was harder. For Daniel. My son. We've been both close and distant in this life. I've learned that love survives both. You don't know me perfection. I never wanted that from you. Just presence. And when you gave it, it was enough. I want you to remember the camping trips, the stories we made up about wolves who baked pies, the way you used to tuck your hand into mine. That was real. It still is. Take care of Maya. Not by protecting her from the world, but by standing beside her when she faces it. I'm proud of you. Even when we were lost from each other, I carried that pride like a second heart. Yours, Mum. I added a copy of the lemon pie recipe, written in my handwriting, flour stains and all. He'd always said no one else's crust was quite the same. Now he could try, even if he never quite got it right. And then Rosa. Rosa. You found me when I didn't know I was still worth finding. Your voice gave me back mine. I want you to remember that your strength doesn't come from surviving. It comes from choosing to keep creating. You made something out of silence. That's a kind of magic. Keep fighting for the unheard. Keep writing their names into the light. And when the world tells you that your softness makes you vulnerable, remind them that the ocean is soft too. And it carves through stone. Always in your corner. Eleanor. With her letter, I included the pressed dandelion the child had given me at the park. Fragile, yes. But still intact. Each letter went into its own envelope. I labeled them simply. To be opened when it matters most. I placed them all in the cedar box, along with a few photographs. A black and white one of my wedding day, one of Daniel and Maya asleep on the couch years ago, and one of me and Rosa at the park bench, taken by a stranger who offered to capture the moment. It had become one of my favorites. Last, I added a small silver key. It opened the drawer in my writing desk where I kept old journals, poetry never shared, and the first story I ever wrote but never dared to send anywhere. Maybe one day someone would find it and decide it was worth reading. I closed the box gently, hands resting on the lid for a moment longer. There was no ache, no sadness, only clarity. I had once feared being forgotten, but now I knew. Being remembered doesn't come from grand gestures or loud demands. It comes from the quiet ways we choose to show up, from the stories we pass down, the laughter we leave behind, the way someone says your name with warmth long after you've left the room. I wasn't leaving these letters because I expected anything. I was leaving them because I had something to give. Love, yes, but also truth. And the soft, stubborn mark of a life fully lived, even in silence. The scent of cinnamon reached me before my eyes even opened. It was warm and heavy in the air, curling through the hallway like a familiar tune. Somewhere, a timer dinged. A laugh followed, bright, unfiltered. Maya. I blinked against the soft morning light filtering through the curtains, brushing across the quilt like golden fingers. The room was quiet but not empty. There was movement, life, a hum that had replaced the echo I used to fear. I sat up slowly. My joints reminded me of their age, but I welcomed the ache. It meant I was still here. A year ago to the day, I had woken up in a hospital bed, my arms slack and my world sliding away from me. Now I sat in my own bedroom, wrapped in scent and sound and something even softer, belonging. I padded toward the kitchen, cane tapping lightly against the wood floor. Maya was at the counter, cheeks flushed, sleeves rolled up, her hair tied messily in a bandana. She was dusted in flour, humming off key. "Morning, Gran," she said when she saw me. "Cinnamon buns. Don't get excited, they're still half-burned. They smell perfect." She grinned. I wanted to try something new. Thought today needed a bit of sweetness. She pulled a tray from the oven, the buns golden and imperfect, just like life. On the table sat my favorite teacups, already set. A second kettle hissed gently on the stove. "Rosa's coming, right?" Maya asked. "She is," I said. She texted she's on her way. Something about bringing marmalade from a farmer's market. She swears is life-changing. Maya snorted. "She's dramatic." "She's alive," I said. "And she's visiting. That's all I need." As if summoned, a knock came at the door. Maya opened it before I could get there. "Rosa," she chirped. "Come in before you change your mind." Rosa stepped inside, wrapped in a light scarf, cheeks pink from the wind. She held up a small jar like a trophy. "I brought sunshine in a jar," she said. "Also known as orange marmalade with ginger, and a touch of something that might be illegal." I laughed, arms open. She hugged me tight. "Happy you day," she said. "Is that what we're calling it now?" "Seems appropriate," Rosa said. "The anniversary of your second beginning." We sat at the table, the three of us. Maya spread butter on the buns. Rosa told stories about a new literacy initiative she was starting, one inspired by the mentoring work we once shared. I listened. I sipped tea. I watched them move and speak and live. No one mentioned the hospital. No one asked me how I was doing, because I wasn't something to check on anymore. I was just part of things. Later in the afternoon, the door opened again. Daniel stepped in, sheepish as ever, holding a small potted plant. A lavender bush, fragrant and bright. "I figured the kitchen needed a bit more purple," he said. "It needs your hands more often," I said, smiling. He kissed my cheek. "It's good to see you like this." "Like what?" He shrugged. "You." He placed the pot on the windowsill, next to the bird figurines and the pressed dandelion in a glass jar. Maya had framed it after finding it in the letterbox. "Looks good there," Daniel said. We didn't need more words than that. Time passed the way it always does when you stop watching it. Teare fillet. Buns vanished. Rosa washed dishes while Maya dried. Daniel sat on the back step, watching birds. I moved between them, not as a ghost, not as a guest, just as Eleanor. The house breathed with us. It held no grudges, no shadows. Only echoes of laughter, and the soft scuff of socks on the floor. As the sky turned amber and the air cooled, Rosa hugged me goodbye. "I'll see you next week," she said. "And the week after that. Until you're tired of me." "I don't think that's possible." She kissed my forehead. "Take care, Eleanor." Daniel followed not long after. He left the lavender where it stood, promising to help Maya plant it in the garden next visit. He held my hand a little longer this time, before stepping out into the dusk. Maya lingered. We stood in the doorway together, the evening breeze slipping through the screen. She turned to me, suddenly serious. "You changed everything," she whispered. I reached for her hand, pressed it gently. Then I touched the small scar on my arm. The one from the 4 that morning in the hospital, the moment everything began to fall. "So did you," I whispered back. She leaned in and kissed my cheek. "Love you, Gran. I love you more." And just like that, she was gone. The door closed behind her with a quiet click, not of finality, but of rhythm, of life moving on. I turned back to the kitchen. The cups were still on the table. The scent of cinnamon still clung to the air. The lavender shimmered in the fading light. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't wondering if I mattered. I had lived. I had loved. I had been remembered, not in loud declarations, but in dandelions, pie crusts, laughter, and letters. I sat in my chair, hands resting in my lap, and listened. The house was quiet again. But it wasn't empty. It was full of me,